Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this, well, the card that you're seeing on the screen, which is the RX 570 4GB. Now, I picked up this old mining card on eBay for £16. Now, it was advertised as for parts and not working, and when it arrived, it was evident why. For some reason, the previous owner had flashed the MSI Gaming X version of the BIOS onto this card, which meant there was an SSID mismatch and the card would not post into Windows. It had error 43, the error code 43 had come up in Windows 11, and the card wouldn't work. So you had to boot off integrated graphics and then, well, flash a new BIOS. But for some reason, the card wouldn't take to a new SSID. So after about 16 BIOS flashes though, it worked. I don't know why, but it did. Anyway, let's get into the video. And today we're going to be taking a look at some games and how this card performs. The first of these games is Hogwarts Legacy. Now, obviously this is a modern title. It came out, 7 years after the RX 570? And to be honest, it still runs pretty well. We didn't have any VRAM limitations here, hovering at around 3.6GB for the whole time. And we were running at 1080p medium settings with FSR quality enabled. Now, we saw an average frame rate of 49 FPS and 1% lows of 36. And to be honest, overall, it was really quite playable, and it still looked pretty decent too. Now, the system we're testing with today gives the RX 570 a chance to stretch its legs. It's the, as we coined it in an earlier video, cheap computer channel test PC of righteousness. It's got a Ryzen 7 9700X and 32GB of DDR5 RAM. So basically, it just lets it stretch its legs and we get to see what the true performance of this 570 is. Now, to be fair, if you shove this card in a system with an old i5 or even an old i3, you could get pretty decent gaming performance for what wouldn't be very expensive. So yeah, overall, 4GB of VRAM on this card is not an issue, even though we're using 20GB of RAM, so I'm thinking that might be a bit of a card RAM dump into the PC's RAM to compensate for it not actually having much VRAM. Anyway, let's get into the next game. Up now, we've got what has become a staple on this channel. We've got Skyrim, the Anniversary Edition here, and of course, there was no real problems running this at 1080p medium, no, not 1080p medium, at 1080p ultra settings, we saw 60 FPS for our average frame rate and 60 FPS for our 1% lows. This was a very playable experience. And of course, the original game anyway, came out before the RX 570's release, so it's kind of expected. But just going back to these older games, they're very enjoyable to play on this card and are a clear use case for it. Now, at this £20 price range that you can pick up these mining cards for, I mean, if you get lucky and find one, that is, there isn't really much competition for the RX 570. I mean, usually you can find GTX 1050s, not the Ti, just the 1050s around this price-ish, and other than that, it's the only modern graphics card that really competes, and the 1050 realistically isn't on the same level as the 570, and it's only got 2GB of VRAM, so yeah, I think if you can pick up one of these RX 570s for around £20, or even if you get lucky and get one like I did for around £16, they're very good value overall. And yeah, you'll pretty much be good for most games running at 1080p medium settings up to about 60 frames per second. I mean, that is games up to about 2022 or 2023. It goes a bit mad after that, but for most games, it's a genuinely nice experience for such cheap hardware. So yeah. Now, we're using a modern system here. So if you're going to be using an older system with an RX 570, just take these performance results with a grain of salt. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. Okay, so, Fortnite. Here we were running at 1080p using TSR medium set to the quality preset at the competitive settings, so you know everything on low and then view distance on epic. And we saw an average frame rate of 116 FPS with 1% lows of 83. This was, again, a very playable experience. We were under the VRAM limit and, well, the card was generally pretty decent in the game. Obviously, if you, again, want an esports-based PC, the 570 is going to be enough for the likes of CSGO, Fortnite, and, I don't know, Rocket League, I guess, if anyone still plays Rocket League. Sorry to any Rocket League fans out there, I hope I haven't offended you, but yeah. Overall, decent performance. Now, to be fair, if you wanted the game to look a bit pretty, you can turn the settings up a bit on this card and it'll still run at above 60 frames per second. So it really does just depend what you want out of your gaming experience. And yeah, if you just want this card, or if you want a PC in general to pick up and play some games with your mates when you're catching up, or anything like that really, well, the RX 570 is clearly a decent option. Now, today's video is a bit shorter, just moving on here, but I didn't really know what games to test, because to be honest, I think Hogwarts Legacy kind of summarises most modern games with being quite VRAM consuming, looking quite good, and yeah, I don't think you're going to be running many like 2024 onwards Unreal Engine 5 titles, but for the games that we've tested today, and any games that are similar, then you're going to be pretty well set, to be honest. Now, I mentioned not being able to run Unreal Engine 5 titles and more modern games that demand RTX and ray tracing features, and here on screen you're seeing what happens when we try and run Avatar Frontiers of Pandora on this card. It just, well, it causes the ominous black screen of death in Windows 11. I didn't actually realise this had been replaced. I thought it was still a blue screen, but no, black screen of death. Anyway, yeah, this is why we don't try and run modern titles on this card. So yeah. Up now, we've got Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now, this game, well, it released around the same time, I think, as the RX 570, and it shows. I mean, 1080p medium settings, we saw an average frame rate of 66 frames per second running through the benchmark, and it was smooth, consistent, decent frame times, no stutters, and overall it was a nice experience. Now, again, we are letting this card run probably better than it will in most scenarios where it's used these days, because obviously we've got that pretty decent CPU and a lot of RAM overhead. But yeah, overall, this card is pretty good for games of the era that it was released in. So, well, no complaints here anyway. I think we've ran through some games. Let's just wrap up the video with some synthetic benchmarks. Now, today, as is traditional on this channel really, we're running two. We've got 3D Mark Firestrike and 3D Mark Time Spy. Now, in Time Spy, the RX 570 performs pretty well. We saw a graphics score of 3,976 points. Now, moving on from this, in Firestrike, a DirectX 11 benchmark, we saw a graphics score of 13,905 points. Now, compared to the other cards you've had on this channel, where does the RX 570 lie? Well, there should be a chart up on the screen now which kind of shows the comparisons between some of the graphics cards. And the RX 570 is quite similar to the RX 6500 XT in both its scores. It beats out the R9 283GB quite convincingly and is about 60% the performance of the RTX 3050. So overall, it does hold up pretty well to other cards that are more expensive than it, even still today. Now, I hope you've all enjoyed this shorter video today. And that, well, maybe it's convinced you that an RX 570 is still a good option, even if it's the 4GB version. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please do subscribe if you feel up to it, drop a like on the video, and drop a comment down below. I don't know, tell me maybe if you'd like to see a guide on how to use the VBIOS flashing tool from AMD. I mean, there are other guides on YouTube that'll be better than mine, but hey, it's a content idea. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.